Your gut health may be the single most powerful lever you can pull to slow aging, and gastroenterologists know it. But most of them are not prescribing the right thing. They are prescribing pills. What they should be prescribing are probiotic plants. Living, growable plants that feed and rebuild your gut microbiome the way no capsule ever will. Here's what nobody tells you. Your large intestine is home to between 38 and 100 trillion living bacteria. Every one of them is working on your behalf, producing compounds that reach your brain, your joints, your immune system. When that ecosystem thrives, you age slowly. When it collapses, inflammation moves in and starts doing damage that looks like aging but is really just a neglected garden. The Bible understood this long before modern science named it. Long before gastroenterology gave us the word microbiome, Scripture was pointing people toward the exact plants that feed it. Bitter herbs at Passover. Garlic and leeks the Israelites craved in Egypt. Honey from a land of abundance. These were not just food. They were medicine for the gut the ancient world knew intuitively. Today I am walking you through 15 of those plants, most of them growing in your yard or easily grown in a container right now. Stay with me through plant number 11, because that is the one your neighbors are mowing down every single week, not knowing it is the most potent free prebiotic weed in the Northern Hemisphere. I spent years in nursing watching patients cycle through the same prescriptions, acid blockers, antibiotic courses, fiber powders for the same gut problems, over and over. Not one of those treatments fed the microbiome. They managed symptoms. There is a difference between managing a sick garden and rebuilding the soil underneath it. When I started homesteading, something shifted. I began growing the plants. Scripture mentions garlic, leeks, onions, bitter herbs, figs, barley. Honey and I started reading what modern gut research was discovering about those exact plants. The overlap stunned me. The Israelites in Numbers 11 wept for garlic and leeks and onions, the foods that feed the bacteria that keep the gut lining intact. The Passover bitter herbs carry documented inulin concentrations that rival commercial prebiotic powders. Coincidence is not the right word for any of that. Every plant in today's video meets 3 standards I apply here on the homestead. The Bible mentions or points toward it, modern gut science confirms it works, and you can grow it at home on a porch, in a raised bed, or in a window box without spending a single dollar on supplements. Let us begin. Numbers 11-5. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. The Israelites were in the wilderness, and garlic was on the short list of what they missed most. That specificity matters. When God's people wandered for 40 years, they did not cry out for medicine. They cried out for garlic. Ancient people knew at some level, even before the vocabulary existed, that garlic was doing something essential for their bodies. You carry that same instinct every time you reach for it in the kitchen. Trust it. Raw garlic contains fructo-oligosaccharides at roughly 3 to 9% fresh weight. These fibers selectively feed Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, the 2 bacterial families most associated with reduced gut inflammation and stronger immune response. A study in Frontiers in Nutrition found garlic fructans showed better prebiotic properties than commercial fructose extracts for certain lactobacillus strains. Raw is the priority. Cooking converts those prebiotic chains into simple sugars your body absorbs before they ever reach your bacteria. Garlic is one of the easiest plants for any gardener with limited mobility. Plant individual cloves 2 inches deep in any container, at least 8 inches wide, pointed end up. Plant in autumn. Harvest the following summer when the lower leaves brown. 1 pot yields a full head with minimal effort. No staking, no digging required. And if raw garlic is too sharp for your gut right now, plant number 12 is the milder wild cousin from the forest, gentler, on a sensitive system, and free for the foraging. Numbers 11-5 again. Leeks appear in the same verse as garlic, listed by name among the foods God's people mourned in the wilderness. These were not comfort foods. They were health anchors the body remembered. Most women I speak with throw away the dark green leek tops every time they cook. That is the part I want you to stop discarding right now. The pale white shaft is what restaurants use. The dark green top is what your gut bacteria are actually waiting for. Leek green tops contain significantly higher concentrations of fructo-oligosaccharides than the white shaft, the prebiotic fiber that selectively feeds Bifidobacterium. Leeks also contain camphorol, a flavonoid shown in cell studies to support the structural integrity of the gut lining. A compromised gut lining is directly linked to systemic inflammation, the biological process that accelerates aging faster than almost anything else. Leeks grow beautifully in deep containers at least 12 inches deep, plant seedlings 6 inches apart. They are cold-hardy and nearly maintenance-free, ideal if your time in the garden is limited. They stand through autumn and winter, ready to harvest as needed, making them one of the most reliable four-season prebiotic plants you can grow. Plant number 3 comes from the same biblical verse and the same allium family, but its shorter fiber chain structure means it ferments differently and feeds a different subset of bacteria your gut also needs. Numbers 11-5 listed alongside garlic and leeks among the foods Israel missed. 3 allium plants in one verse is not an accident. Together they form what may be the oldest documented prebiotic toolkit in written history. Here is something most home cooks do not know. The outer 2 or 3 layers of an onion, the ones closest to the papery skin, contain the highest quercetin concentrations of the entire bulb. Most people peel those layers off without a second thought and throw away the most valuable part. Onion fructo-oligosaccharides have shorter chain lengths than garlic or leek, which means they ferment faster and provide a more immediate fuel source for certain gut bacteria. Red and yellow onions outperform white in prebiotic content because the pigmented varieties carry flavonoids that work alongside the fiber. Raw onion delivers the highest prebiotic load. Cooking can reduce fructo-oligosaccharide content by around 50% in some preparations. Red onions are easy in containers. Plant sets in spring in at least 8 inches of depth, full sun. They require almost no intervention and can be grown in a window box if space is genuinely limited. Harvest when the green tops fall over naturally. One planter box can provide enough raw onion for daily use through summer and into autumn. Plant number 4 takes us out of the allium family entirely into a bitter herb the Israelites ate on the night they left Egypt. One that modern analysis shows is packed with some of the highest inulin concentrations of any plant you can grow at home. Exodus 12-8 God commands the Passover meal to be eaten with bitter herbs. Jewish tradition and botanical history both identify chicory as one of the primary bitter herbs of that meal. This was not symbolic garnish. It was medicine embedded in a sacred feast. You have already eaten chicory this week, you just did not know it. If you have ever picked up a protein bar or a fiber supplement and read the back label, chicory root extract is what the food industry quietly uses to add fiber without changing flavor. What they are selling in that capsule grows as a sky blue wildflower along roadsides across the entire northern hemisphere. Chicory root contains 11 to 20 grams of inulin per 100 grams fresh weight. By dry weight, researchers have measured concentrations from 41 to 68% depending on variety and season, which is precisely why it became the commercial extraction source of choice. Evidence confirms chicory-derived inulin promotes measurable increases in bifidobacterium populations with corresponding reductions in markers for intestinal inflammation. A second mechanism, the bitter sesquiterpene lactones in chicory root stimulate bile production, which improves fat metabolism and supports liver function simultaneously. Chicory grows from seed in average soil and actually prefers drier conditions, ideal for a low-maintenance container garden. Sow seeds directly in spring. The taproot goes deep, so use a container at least 12 inches deep. Harvest roots in autumn when inulin concentration peaks. Slice thin and dry on a rack. One plant will produce multiple harvests if you harvest only the outer roots and leave the crown intact. Plant number 5 is the one your neighbors pull out of the lawn every weekend. Bag up and send to the landfill, not knowing it may carry higher inulin concentrations than the chicory root extract in that expensive supplement on their shelf. Exodus 12-8 and Numbers 9-11 both reference bitter herbs eaten at Passover. Dandelion has been identified by multiple botanical historians and rabbinical sources as one of the 5 classical bitter herbs of the Passover Seder. It was not a weed to the ancient world. It was medicine placed in plain sight. Right now, somewhere within a quarter mile of where you are sitting, dandelions are growing. They are free. They require no planting, no watering, no containers, and no effort. The entire conversation about gut health supplements, the powders, the capsules, the probiotic drinks, and the answer may be sitting in your front lawn being sprayed with herbicide. Dandelion root contains up to 40% inulin by dry weight, a figure confirmed in multiple phytochemical analyses. Fresh weight ranges from 4 to 12% depending on season, with autumn-harvested roots consistently highest. The leaves carry a different mechanism, bitter sesquiterpene lactones, specifically taraxacin and taraxacerin, that trigger bile secretion and prime the entire digestive system before food even arrives. This plant does not just feed gut bacteria, it prepares the gut to receive food properly. You do not need to plant dandelion, you need to stop removing it. If your garden is pesticide-free, simply allow a section to grow freely. If you cannot verify your lawn is clean, identify an unsprayed meadow or field edge near you and harvest from there. Young leaves before flowering are tender enough for salads. Roots, harvested in autumn, sliced thin and dried on a rack, make a prebiotic root tea that will last through winter. Plant number 6 appears in a garden context in the Book of Job, and it turns out the fiber inside its stems works through a mechanism that is gentler on sensitive guts than anything we have covered so far, making it the ideal starting point for women just beginning to rebuild gut health. Job 8:11 references plants that grow beside water, and asparagus has been a cultivated and wild harvested garden plant across the Middle East for at least 2,000 years, appearing in ancient Egyptian records and referenced in early Roman texts that draw on the same agricultural tradition the Old Testament world shared. Most women I speak with already consider asparagus a health food. They are right, but for the wrong reason. They think it is the vitamins. The real reason asparagus belongs in a gut health conversation is what sits inside the stem, a fiber structure that feeds bacteria while simultaneously soothing the gut lining around them. Asparagus contains inulin-type fructan, the same structural family as chicory and dandelion, at roughly 2 to 3 grams per 100 grams raw. It is a lower concentration than dandelion root, but asparagus also contains saponins, compounds that appear to have a calming effect on the intestinal lining and may ease the fermentation process for women with more sensitive systems. Asparagine in asparagus also provides a nitrogen source for certain gut bacteria, supporting bacterial growth beyond just carbohydrate fuel. Asparagus crowns are the smartest investment in a perennial garden. Plant crowns 6 to 8 inches deep in a raised bed or deep container. You will wait 2 to 3 years before harvesting, but once established, a single planting produces spears for 20 years or more. This is the definition of low-strain, high-reward homesteading for the long term. Patience here pays in decades, not seasons. Plant number 7 was handled daily by the woman of noble character. In Proverbs 31, and the fiber inside its seed coat forms a gel in your gut that is more pronounced than anything we have covered so far. Proverbs 31-13 describes the woman of noble character working with flax. Joshua 2-6 records Rahab hiding the spies beneath stalks of flax on her rooftop. Flax was a fiber crop and a food crop central to daily life across the biblical world, not incidental background detail. Flaxseed has been sold largely on its omega-3 story, and that story is real. But the prebiotic story inside the seed coat has barely reached mainstream conversation at all. The mucilaginous fiber that forms when ground flax contacts liquid is one of the most practical gut-supporting tools you can add to a morning routine, and it costs almost nothing. Ground flax seed coat contains mucilaginous fiber that forms a gel feeding lactobacillus and bifidobacterium populations preferentially. The lignans in flaxseed are chemically transformed by gut bacteria into compounds called enterolignans, enterodiol, and enterolactone, meaning your gut bacteria are producing active compounds for your body from what you are not just feeding bacteria, they are working for you in return. Ground is essential. Whole seeds often pass through intact before the gut can access the fiber. Flax grows easily from seed in a sunny location. It tolerates poor soil and is one of the lowest maintenance crops in any homestead garden. Direct sow in spring. Plants are slender and beautiful with sky blue flowers. Harvest seed heads when they rattle. Dry fully, then store seeds and grind weekly in a small spice grinder. Refrigerate ground meal in an airtight jar. The oils oxidize quickly at room temperature and should never be left out. Plant number 8 appears in one of the most famous food verses in the Old Testament, the list of 7 species God promised to Israel. And the beta-glucan fiber inside it feeds a type of bacteria that directly protects the wall of your gut. Deuteronomy 8:8, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, of olive trees and honey. Barley is the second grain named in God's promise to Israel. It was a staple, a medicine, and a measure of value. Ruth gleaned barley in the fields of Boaz. This grain was not incidental to biblical life. Most women over 40 have heard that fiber is good for them. What almost nobody explains is that the specific fiber in barley beta-glucan targets a bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila that literally lives in and maintains the mucus layer protecting your gut wall. Without that layer, the gut wall becomes permeable. Things that should not enter your bloodstream start getting through. The medical term is increased intestinal permeability. The plain language is, the wall develops gaps. Research published in Current Nutrition Reports found that regular whole grain consumption measurably increased Akkermansia muciniphila populations in study participants. Beta-glucan forms a viscous gel in the digestive tract that slows glucose absorption while simultaneously providing a structure bacteria colonize and feed on. Cold-cooked barley contains higher levels of resistant starch than warm-resistant starch behaves like a prebiotic, arriving in the large intestine intact to feed bacteria directly. Barley is a cool season grain that grows quickly from seed 60 to 90 days to harvest. It can be grown in large containers or a dedicated raised bed. Sow in early spring or autumn. Harvest when the seed heads dry on the stalk, thresh by hand, and store whole grains in a sealed container. Soak overnight before cooking to soften and begin mild fermentation. Cook in fresh water, then refrigerate, and eat cold or gently rewarmed for maximum resistant starch benefit. We are halfway through today's list. Before we continue, I want to share something about what is happening in your gut right now as you add these plants, because understanding the mechanism changes how seriously you take the next 7. Here is something I want you to understand clearly, because it changes everything about why this list matters. Your gut bacteria do not just digest food. They produce short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate, that your colon wall cells use as their primary fuel. They communicate with your vagus nerve, influencing your mood and anxiety levels directly. They regulate inflammatory signals that either accelerate or slow biological aging at the cellular level. When you eat prebiotic plants consistently, you are not just improving digestion. You are manufacturing the compounds your body runs on at a cellular level. That is not a supplement doing that work. That is a living ecosystem doing it, one that has been doing it for the entire history of the human species. The 7 plants still to come in this video address specific bacterial populations your body needs most urgently as you move through midlife. Each one is distinct. Each one is growable at home. And several of them appear so plainly in Scripture that it is worth asking why we ever stopped eating them regularly. Let us continue. Job 30-7. Among the bushes they cried out. Under the nettles they sheltered. Wild root plants of the uncultivated earth appear throughout the wisdom literature as reminders that provision grows outside human management. Burdock is precisely that kind of plant, foraged across Europe, Asia, and North America for centuries before anyone called it a health food. Burdock root is the plant that gave us Velcro. George de Mestral observed the seed heads sticking to his dog's fur after a walk and designed an entire fastening system around it. The root is something entirely different, one of the most versatile prebiotic root vegetables in the world, eaten daily as a vegetable in Japan and used as a liver and digestive tonic across European, Chinese, and Native American traditions independently. A 2020 review in Food Research International confirmed burdock root contains prebiotic fructans at roughly 3.5 to 7 grams per 100 grams fresh weight, alongside chlorogenic acid, quercetin, and phenolic compounds with documented antioxidant activity. When multiple unconnected traditional medicine systems arrive at the same plant for the same complaint across centuries, the mechanism is usually real, the biochemistry is simply catching up. Burdock paired with miso creates a layered prebiotic and probiotic effect in one bowl. Burdock has a deep tap root. It needs a container at least 18 to 24 inches deep, or a loose raised bed. Sow seeds directly in spring. The root is ready to harvest in autumn of the first year. It is drought-tolerant once established and requires almost no attention through the growing season. Harvest by loosening soil around the root rather than pulling the root can reach 3 feet long in ideal conditions. Plant number 10 is the one I promised at the start, the weed your neighbors are removing from their lawns every weekend. And the gel it forms inside your gut is the exact same mechanism as the commercial psyllium husk supplement sold for gut health at any pharmacy. Psalm 104-14. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and plants for the service of man. Broadleaf plantain grows wherever human feet have walked and disturbed the soil. It follows human habitation. It has been called the white man's footprint by indigenous peoples of North America because it appeared wherever European settlers traveled. A plant that follows humanity and heals the gut may not be accidental. This is the one I promised you at the beginning. Broadleaf plantain Plantago major is growing in your driveway cracks, between your paving stones, along the edge of your lawn right now. The European Medicines Agency has published a formal herbal monograph on its close relative Plantago lanceolata, specifically recognizing its traditional use for soothing mucous membranes, including the intestinal lining. A formal government medicine agency. For a lawn weed, let that register. Plantain leaf contains polysaccharides that form a thick, mucilaginous gel in the digestive tract, the same gel-forming mechanism used in commercial psyllium husk supplements. This gel acts simultaneously as a prebiotic substrate feeding bacteria and as a physical coating protecting the mucosal layer beneath. In cases of gut irritation, cramping, or loose stools, plantain leaf tea has been a first-response intervention across multiple traditional medical systems for centuries because the gel buys the gut wall time to stabilize. You do not need to grow broadleaf plantain, it is already growing. What you need to do is stop removing it and identify a clean, unsprayed patch. The critical rule: if your lawn uses any herbicide or pesticide, do not harvest from it. Find a meadow edge or field border you know has not been treated. Young leaves before the seed spike appears are tender enough to eat raw in small amounts as a salad addition. Once the seed spike appears, use the leaves for tea instead. 2 tablespoons fresh leaf or 1 teaspoon dried, steeped covered in near boiling water for 10 minutes. Covering the cup matters. Volatile anti-inflammatory compounds evaporate from an open vessel. Plant number 11 grows in spring forests and smells unmistakably of garlic before you even see it. A wild allium with a more complex sulfur compound profile than cultivated garlic and a prebiotic fiber structure that surprises researchers who study it closely. The allium family appears explicitly in Numbers 11-5 and runs throughout the biblical food tradition. Wild garlic is the ancestor of the cultivated varieties Scripture references, the plant that filled the woodlands before agriculture formalized around domesticated bulbs. Foraging the wild form connects to a food practice older than the written record. In April, I know which patch of Douglas fir forest I will be walking into before I see a single plant. I can smell it from 30 feet away unmistakably, intensely garlic. Wild garlic carpets deciduous woodland floors in early spring in a way that feels less like a weed and more like a deliberate provision. The harvest window is only 8 to 10 weeks. That narrow window is part of why it matters. Wild garlic shares the fructo-oligosaccharide profile of cultivated garlic, but presents a more complex sulfur compound array across the leaves, flowers, and small bulbs. Preliminary research suggests the leaf extract may carry a broader antimicrobial profile than cultivated garlic bulbs, selectively suppressing pathogenic strains without disrupting the broader microbial ecosystem. Most current evidence comes from laboratory and in vitro studies. The human clinical picture is still developing, but the biochemical basis is well established. Wild garlic can be transplanted into a shaded garden bed by moving small clumps with their root systems intact in early spring. It prefers moist, well-drained soil and dappled shade, ideal beneath a deciduous tree or along a north-facing fence. It will spread slowly and return every year. Pick leaves before flowering for peak nutrient density. Once it flowers, the plant redirects energy to seed production and the leaf profile shifts. Wild garlic grows in the same environments as lily of the valley, which is toxic. The distinguishing test is straightforward. Crush a leaf between your fingers. Wild garlic smells unmistakably of garlic. Lily of the valley has no garlic scent whatsoever. Smell before you eat, every single time without exception. Plant number 12 has been stinging gardeners for centuries and described as a sign of desolation in the book of Isaiah, and yet it carries one of the most complete mineral and prebiotic profiles of any wild plant in the northern hemisphere. Isaiah 34:13. Thorns shall grow over its strongholds, nettles and brambles in its fortresses. Nettle appears in Scripture as a marker of places abandoned and left to return to wildness. There is a symmetry worth considering. The plant that reclaims neglected ground also reclaims neglected health. It moves into the gaps. The sting is a deterrent, not a barrier. Once blanched for 60 seconds or dried, the stinging mechanism is completely deactivated. What remains is one of the most nutritionally complete wild plants in the temperate world. Iron, calcium, magnesium, vitamins A, C, and K, meaningful protein, and a prebiotic polysaccharide profile that is still being characterized by researchers who are genuinely surprised by what they keep finding. Preliminary observations suggest nettle polysaccharides may act as prebiotic substrates, while simultaneously exerting anti-inflammatory influence on the gut lining, nourishing beneficial bacteria while dampening the inflammatory signals that pathogenic strains exploit. Nettle also contains a lectin called urtica dioica agglutinin, which has shown interesting interactions with immune receptors in gut cell studies. The clinical picture in humans is still developing. What is well established is its mineral density. 1 cup of nettle tea provides a meaningful amount of calcium and magnesium in a bioavailable form. Stinging nettle grows from root divisions or seed in moist, nitrogen-rich soil compost bins, and the edges of raised beds are ideal. Plant in a contained area as it spreads aggressively. Harvest the top 6 inches of the plant in spring before flowering, using thick gloves. Blanch in boiling water for 60 seconds, drain, and use exactly like spinach. Dry excess leaves on a rack for winter tea. The plant regrows after cutting and will produce multiple harvests per season. Plant number 13 is one of the 7 species God named in his promise to Israel, and the fiber inside it feeds the specific bacterium that produces the primary fuel source for the cells lining your colon. Deuteronomy 8:8 includes figs among the 7 species of the Promised Land. 1 Kings 4:25 describes the era of Solomon's peace as a time when every man sat under his vine and under his fig tree. The fig tree in Scripture is not decoration, it is the symbol of provision, security, and a life well tended. Isaiah instructed a poultice of figs to be applied to King Hezekiah's wound, and the king recovered. Ancient cultures used figs topically and internally for healing across the Mediterranean and Middle East. They were not guessing. The fig was one of the first foods domesticated before wheat, before barley, because it produces abundantly with minimal effort and keeps the people eating it healthy. Figs are rich in pectin, the same soluble fiber found in apple skin, which acts as a primary prebiotic for Faecalibacterium Prausnitzii, one of the most clinically significant bacteria in current gut research. Prausnitzii ferments pectin primarily into butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid that serves as the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining your colon. Without adequate butyrate, those cells begin to deteriorate. Prausnitzii is consistently found in lower concentrations in people with inflammatory bowel conditions. Fresh figs also provide soluble and insoluble fiber in combination that supports motility and microbial diversity simultaneously. Fig trees are one of the most container-friendly fruit trees available. A fig in a large pot, 20 gallons or more, will produce fruit within 2 to 3 years and can be moved indoors to overwinter in cold climates. They require full sun, moderate water, and almost no fertilizing. Varieties like brown turkey or Chicago hardy are reliable producers in a wide range of conditions. A single container fig tree is one of the highest yield, lowest effort plants you can add to any homestead, porch, or balcony. Plant number 14, shares the same pectin mechanism as figs, but in a slightly different form, and the skin of the fruit is the part that matters most, which most people have been trained by the commercial food industry to peel off. Song of Solomon 2-5. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. Song of Solomon 8-5. Under the apple tree I awakened you. The apple in Scripture is associated with restoration and vitality. It was not a random fruit choice. The phrase "an apple a day keeps the doctor away" was dismissed as folk wisdom so thoroughly that people stopped asking what it might actually be pointing at. Part of the answer, at least, sits in the skin. Apple pectin is concentrated in the skin and the layer just beneath it. A peeled apple provides fiber. A whole apple provides a targeted prebiotic that feeds bacteria your colon cells depend on for their primary fuel. The peel is the whole point. Research published in Applied and Environmental Microbiology confirmed that most Faecalibacterium Prausnitzii strains grow well on apple pectin and ferment it into butyrate, the same mechanism we covered with figs. The distinction between heirloom and commercial apple varieties matters here. Heirloom varieties from older orchards tend to carry higher pectin concentrations than modern varieties bred for extended shelf life and uniform appearance. The pectin in cooked apple may actually be slightly more accessible to gut bacteria than in raw apple, as heat partially breaks down the cell walls containing it. The key word for any cooked preparation is unsweetened added sugar actively suppresses the beneficial bacteria you are trying to build. Columnar apple varieties grow 8 to 10 feet tall and only 2 feet wide, ideal for a narrow garden bed or a large container on a porch. They produce full-sized apples and require minimal pruning. A single columnar apple tree will yield enough fruit for fresh eating and drying through autumn. Plant 2 different varieties for cross-pollination, or choose a self-fertile variety such as Scarlet Sentinel. Grow your own and you control pesticide exposure, one of the most important factors given that commercially grown apples consistently appear on high pesticide monitoring lists. Plant number 15 is the one I saved deliberately for last. The Bible calls the land that holds it a gift, and what is inside it is not just food, it is a living enzyme system that modern research is only beginning to fully characterize. Proverbs 24-13. Eat honey, my son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Deuteronomy 8-8 names honey among the 7 gifts of the Promised Land. Psalm 119-103. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Honey appears more than 60 times in Scripture. The ancient world did not treat it as an indulgence. It was medicine first. Commercially processed, heat-pasteurized honey is effectively sugar. That characterization is largely accurate, and that is not what I am talking about. Raw honey, unheated, unfiltered, from a single floral source is biochemically a different substance. The moment heat is applied above 40 degrees Celsius, the enzyme systems begin to degrade, and the more delicate prebiotic structures start to break down. What you buy from a local beekeeper in a jar that has never been heated is not what you find in the plastic bear at the supermarket. Raw honey contains oligosaccharides, gluco-oligosaccharides, and fructo-oligosaccharides that have demonstrated prebiotic activity in multiple in vitro and animal studies. A 2022 review in Frontiers in Nutrition summarized evidence showing raw honey supports growth of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus while simultaneously inhibiting several pathogenic strains. Raw honey also contains glucose oxidase, an enzyme that generates low-level hydrogen peroxide, contributing to its well-documented antimicrobial properties at concentrations that are selective, not indiscriminate. The prebiotic oligosaccharides make up 1 to 11% of total composition depending on floral source, so the dose is small and precise. You are using raw honey as a targeted addition to a broader strategy, not a primary fiber source. You do not keep bees to access raw honey, you support the beekeepers in your local area who do. What you can grow: borage, lavender, clover, phacelia, and comfrey, all of which support local pollinator populations and can be purchased as honey from those same hives. Growing a pollinator garden is a participation in the same ecosystem that produces the honey. Source locally, source raw, Source from a beekeeper who can tell you how their honey is processed. 1 teaspoon of raw honey stirred into a glass of room temperature water, 30 minutes before a meal. That is the traditional preparation across multiple cultures and centuries, and it is how I use it. Room temperature matters. Heat begins to degrade the enzyme system immediately. One hard note: honey is still a sugar. If you are managing blood sugar carefully, bring this to your doctor or dietitian before adding it. The appropriate amount is 1 teaspoon. This is not a food to eat freely under the banner of gut health. It is one precise tool and a strategy built from all 15 plants on this list. Before I give you the close, I want to leave you with something you can start tomorrow morning. This is the daily prebiotic ritual I have built from the 15 plants we covered today, simplified to what is realistic, what is free or nearly free, and what fits into a real morning before the day gets complicated. Step 1. Before you eat anything, stir 1 teaspoon of raw honey into a glass of room temperature water. Drink it. Wait 20 minutes. That is your gut primer. Step 2. Brew your morning prebiotic root tea. 1 teaspoon of dried dandelion root or chicory root, whichever you have, simmered in 2 cups of water for 12 to 15 minutes, then strained. Drink it warm before breakfast. This stimulates bile, primes gastric juice production, and delivers inulin before food arrives. Your digestive system will receive breakfast differently. Step 3. Your first food. Cold-cooked barley from the night before, or oat groats soaked and cooked with 1 tablespoon of freshly ground flaxseed stirred in, a small amount of unsweetened apple or fig, and 1/4 of a raw red onion sliced thin on the side. This is not a recipe I am asking you to follow perfectly. It is a framework. 3 prebiotic fibers from 3 different plant families, feeding 3 overlapping bacterial populations in 1 bowl. Step 4. If you have dandelion or plantain growing in a clean part of your property, add 3 or 4 young leaves to whatever salad or greens you eat at lunch. No preparation required. That is the morning protocol. 4 steps, 3 of which involve plants growing within reach of where you are standing, costing almost nothing. The compounding effect of doing this consistently for 4 weeks is documented in the research on inulin consumption. Beneficial bacterial populations shift measurably within that window. The gut lining begins to benefit from the butyrate those bacteria produce. The inflammatory baseline starts to move. This is the work. 15 plants, most of them in the Bible, most of them growing within reach of wherever you are right now. All of them documented not by supplement companies, not by marketing, but by the kind of phytochemical and microbiome research that has quietly been confirming what our ancestors ate instinctively for generations. The pharmaceutical model for gut health is symptom management. The biblical homesteading model is ecosystem building. Those are not the same project, and they do not produce the same results over a lifetime. If this video added something real to your day, subscribe to Longevity Homesteading. I publish a new video every week on this same premise, that your garden, your hedgerow, and your kitchen shelf are still your most reliable allies in the work of aging well. And before you go, I have a question for you. Of the 15 plants we covered today, which one surprised you most? Leave your answer in the comments and tell me why. I read every one.